Thank you very much, Addie. You know, I get reinforced all the time in terms of why I always find it so delightful to be around Christians. You know, I mean, Christians like to eat. You know, I go to church, but they always have some profound stuff. You know, I mean, a charge to keep I have, a God to glorify, a never-dying soul to save and fitted for the sky, to serve this present age, my calling to fulfill. What do I in all my power engage to do my master's will? If that's not the will of the master, I just don't know what it is. And so we have been thrilled and delighted. And I guess we ought to have a little time for some questions. And then we'll just all have lunch. And so that we can continue, we just have lunch right here in the room and keep on going. You know, like when you was picking cotton, if it was really getting good, they would bring lunch to the field. And that way you wouldn't have to go home for lunch. You wouldn't have to stop. You just stop and eat and continue to pick. So maybe we'll just keep picking. Yes, sir.
Hi, can you hear me? It's not on. Hi, my name is Ernest Coney. I'm with the CDC of Tampa. I want to thank Congressman Davis and the panel and the previous panel as well. I have a comment question. The CDC does youth leadership development, workforce development, several different things. On our youth development, we had a young student who committed strong arm robbery. Some folks were like, kick him out of our program because we can't have kids like that influence in our program. But our counselor stuck with him, and today he's in college. So that broke that cycle. My question becomes, on our workforce side, we create these programs and we have tiers. So those who commit nonviolent crimes, non-sexual crimes, we can easily place these guys into jobs. And then we start creating entrepreneurship opportunities for those who have more strong-arm robbery crimes, harder criminal crimes, sexual crimes. My question becomes, as we become very successful in this project that we're doing, you're going to start seeing others come with difficult backgrounds that want to be placed. That's what I'm starting to see now. I'm starting to see more people with long rap sheets who've looked at their brothers who were very successful coming through our program. And my question is, how do we begin to keep and maintain successful programs but create policies and opportunities for these other guys who are getting kind of left on the wayside because we have to kind of keep successful programs by focusing on those who may have lighter background issues?
I'll comment. I don't have to be the only one to comment. I just said I'll comment. I don't have to be the only one. But I would just tell you that our programs are open to everybody. So while we do have some programs, really they're relatively few, that limit who we can engage in that particular program, by and large, the people who come to us can have any sort of crime and come to us. I would tell you that there are a couple of things. One is obviously to try to match the person with the least opportunity for trouble. So if you have a sex offender, you're going to be very careful about where you place that sex offender. But we found that warehouses, which pay very decent salaries for people, whether they are actually using forklifts or whether they're managing people or whatever they might be doing based on their work history before they came to us, tend to work out fine. But the other thing we are is we're very open and honest with the employers. By and large, because we've been doing this for 37, 38 years, a lot of those employers know us and have some faith in who we are, and therefore will take some chances. But I'll also tell you, you're never going to place everybody. There are just going to be some scenarios where it's not going to work. But your idea of social entrepreneurship, I think, is the right thing to do. We are still trying to get that off the ground, but we're looking for ways that we can build businesses ourselves so that we can give people a work opportunity, let them prove themselves, and then go work with that outside employer so that we can have a track record to take with us.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Lisa Wilmore. I'm from California, but I'm currently attending Howard University. And my family has been ravaged by the California prison system. I mean, at one point last year, all of the men in my life were behind bars. All of them were behind bars. My brother, my father, my closest uncle, and my closest male cousin, all behind bars. And so I've developed over the years a passion for helping those who have criminal records. And you're talking about, Congressman Davis, you're talking about NIMBY, people having that, adopted that mentality, but what they don't realize is these survival crimes will happen in their own backyards. And so we need to do something to prevent that. And so that should be really a motivator for them to help us if they don't want it to happen in their own backyards. But my question is directed at Ms. Williams, but open to everyone, especially Ms. Morris. As someone who's planning to open up a staffing agency for those who have a criminal background, what are some of the challenges that you've faced in the SAFER Foundation, and how can I better prepare for those?
I'm glad to talk to you about that. I suspect it's longer than a quick answer, sort of sitting up here. I mean, first of all, make sure you have legal guidance in setting that up and structuring it. You need to do all the kinds of things that a person does with a business. Look at who your competitors are going to be. Look at the messages that they use to sell their services, and think about how you want to position and brand the work that you're going to be doing as you move forward. But I would also tell you to build relationships and leverage relationships. If, in fact, you have some relationships with people who have relationships with folks who own or run businesses that may, in fact, be interested in hiring people from a staffing agency, then leverage those relationships, because walking and getting in that door is not going to be an easy thing to do. I would also tell you that you should think about who you want to target. Primarily, small to medium businesses are probably more likely to use your services than the large corporate organizations are. Those large corporate organizations have pretty sophisticated human resources functions and are less likely to use an organization like yours or mine when they're looking for people. But again, I'm happy to talk to you more about it at, sort of offline so we don't take up all the time. But I think it is a worthwhile venture, and you're going to have to kind of stay the course, even though it's going to be tough sometimes.
And the only thing I would add is for you to also consider working and partnering with some legal advocates to make sure that you're able to get some of those records, or work with folks who are trying to expunge and seal records and make sure that process is done appropriately as part of your effort.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Eddie Ellis. I'm a formerly incarcerated.
Pick it up just a little bit.
My name is Eddie Ellis. I'm a formerly incarcerated person. I spent 15 years in prison from Washington, D.C. area. I've created a resource manual for D.C. inmates for when they come home. They have over 200 programs in this resource manual. And I've spoken to the mayor, the director of the BOP, about trying to get this book into the hands of D.C. inmates, and it's been to no avail. And it's very discouraging that I'm not a person out here playing a victim. I'm doing what I got to do for my life. I'm doing the right thing. But it's kind of discouraging to keep hearing a lot of these people keep talking about how they implement these programs and things, and the information that these people need, they don't have. I came home, didn't know how to use the subway, didn't know how to basically do anything. Went to jail at 16. And then people expect us to come home and then automatically jump back into life with no resources in our hands at all. And I'm trying to find out how can I get this information in the hands of these men and women before they come home, when they're in halfway houses and things like that. I did my networking, I spoke to people, I gave one to Congressman Davis before, but I'm trying to find out, do anybody have any ideas of how can I get these books in the hands of the right people?
Talk to me after you finish, after
Okay.
this is finished, and I will give you a source.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Right on.
Good afternoon, panelists and Congressman Davis. My name is Randy Robinson. I'm from the National Comprehensive Center for Fathers, located in Philadelphia. I'm the director of government affairs. I'm the bad word there. I work as a lobbyist. My question, I guess, in point is actually toward public policy concerning the issue around reentry. I just wanted to actually create a dialogue, at least bring a point of awareness of one of the hurdles that's confronting men who are coming back from fiscal year 09 through fiscal year FY11 regarding reentries and the issues that's going to be confronting. The big point about coming back to the community reentry is that returning citizens, the fact of the matter is that in most cases in urban areas, the neighborhood that you hung out in 10 years ago, 8 years ago, if you come back, that's actually a gentrified neighborhood, and your numbers don't exist here in the manners that they do. So the fact that we're coming back to a community where is that they are being displaced, and I'm trying to figure out, we're trying to target areas in terms of where can we find additional funding to help them. And the biggest issue we've identified is actually HUD. 1/3 of HUD's budget is actually is not toward development, but towards social services to provide for residents whom they've displaced from those communities. And most of those communities are where men in the urban centers whom actually have gone away, who are incarcerated. So the biggest flag mark that comes up for FY10 and 11 is the U.S. Census. There needs to be a tremendous awareness campaign that these men who are actually away incarcerated needs to continue to be calculated as matriculated in that community, because if they're not captured within the census and counted as a resident or returning resident, there'll be no federal funding for them. So I think there's a way that is moving forward that we need to be able, no matter how much money we get in FY09 for the reentry program, that this budget, that every dollar you get can't be supported for every issue and every cause for reentry. There are other federal organizations and services whose appropriations in FY10 and FY11 need to be calculated to those men who will be returning to those communities, and mainly HUD and Health and Human Services. So I guess it's on two parts. We need to really track HUD in terms of the dollars for development and the dollars for social services, and secondarily, we need to be educated about making sure that our men who are incarcerated, who will be returning to these communities that no longer exist, need to be treated as college students who are away. My friend went to college out of Dallas, Texas for 10 years, but he remained a citizen of Dallas, Texas, and he went back home. That these men need to be calculated within our federal account so that the federal resources can be allocated for their return to the community. So I was wondering if there's any level of kind of concentration, understanding, and looking at how we tackle that.
There really is. As a matter of fact, I used to be the ranking member on the subcommittee that dealt with the census. And even then, we tried to change the way people are counted. Of course, we didn't have the votes to get it done. Currently, Lacey Clay from St. Louis is the chairman of the census subcommittee. And so anybody who thinks that it doesn't make a difference, whether I used to have a buddy who say, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, it doesn't make a nickel's worth of difference. Well, I used to argue with Lou Palmer about that all the time, because we will probably, hopefully, be able to change. We're coming up on the 2010 census. And if a person is in the penitentiary, say in Podunk, Iowa, and they are counted in Podunk, Iowa, the money for the next 10 years for them will go to Podunk, Iowa, even though they may get out of the penitentiary next week and come back to Chicago, Illinois, and where they actually live is in Chicago. We recognize that as a serious issue. We're trying to change it. We haven't been able to do so up to this point, but it certainly is an issue for the Congressional Black Caucus, and it certainly is an issue for those of us who are on oversight and government reform, and it is an issue that we will be pursuing.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Keith Leapart. I'm a physician by training. Actually, this year I have the pleasure of serving as an executive on loan from the Lindfest Foundation to the city of Philadelphia. My services have been lent to the city and to the mayor to look at the criminal justice system, more specifically the reentry-related efforts. And one of the challenges I've seen in Philadelphia has been, what you talked about was coordinating the faith community. So I was really interested in how do we get the faith community to truly sit down, to be a partner at the table, to not feel like they're being used or abused, because, a lot of times they're not a social service agency, as you said. They're not, well positioned to receive funding or get grants, but they are a critical piece of the process. And all of, the studies and reports that I've read of the best ways to effectively motivate the faith community, one, to get to the table. That's one part of the question. The other part of the question is, I've also seen a great challenge in truly getting the business community to open up its doors. Because if it's not, you can have the second chance legislation and all the resources and all the job training, but if the people who are the decision makers within the employment community will not open up the doors, then these people are still going to be struggling to find gainful employment. So just any feedback you could give us in regards to the business community, how we can get truly those doors open, and also coordinating the faith community to be an integral piece of the puzzle in our efforts in Philadelphia.
I can speak to the issue of the faith community, and that is, first of all, what we have seen in many instances is, although some of the churches, the smaller churches, may not have the resources, and the larger churches may have the resources but may not be doing the work in some cases, we have found that all we needed to do was to look at some of the areas where we could benefit some of the places that you'd like to really get to come to the table. Many times you take and offer a fish, you're more inclined to get a good response. And some of the times that we have gone to different communities, a couple of communities in point come to mind. Tarrant County, Texas, where we've worked with the commissioner to totally revamp his whole area, bring the faith community on as true partners to the area. No, they may not have understood the process, but what we did as a part of their coming to the partnership was help them learn how to look for resources. What resources would be more inclined for you to go after? How can we organize situations so that you can come together as a group and apply for things, to teach them how to do it, and then they would be more receptive and more trusting of the governmental structures. Another area which we were very successful in doing that was Jefferson Parish in Louisiana prior to Katrina, where we got the sheriff's office to come together as the convener, because many times in the communities of faith, I hate to say it, but some of us are too busy posturing to be able to do anything worth anything. And so we got to get past the posturing before you can have a decent conversation. So I'll say it, so in case y'all don't like me, that's all right. But so therefore, in order to get past that kind of thing, we have to come to a more equal playing field where everybody feels valued. And the sheriff's office was neutral in bringing resources to help bring the community together, because we sensed that the pastors, if one pastor thought that he was getting more opportunity and play than another, then that another pastor wouldn't come. So it's church politics.
Well, the other way I'll just quickly say, because I don't do much of anything without the church. I've been very fortunate in my public activity, but what I have learned is that you can organize the faith community if you're a part of it. You can't lead where you don't go, and you can't teach what you don't know. And so when I go to a church to ask them to do something, that's not the first time they saw me. I mean, they saw me there for prayer meeting last year. And so it ain't that I'm just, I don't get this stuff when elections come up. You know how they do, you say, well, must be an election. Here come politicians. Now when I go, they say, hey, Danny, come on in. I go there sometime and they say, come say something. No, I don't want to say nothing. Why don't you let Deacon so-and-so sing my favorite song? Amazing Grace or something. I'm saying if you're part of the faith community, it's obviously much easier to work with them and have them respond. And so that's my thing. I'm just part of the set. Hey, I'm AME this week. I'm Baptist next week. I go to Church of God in Christ churches, and some of my colleagues, like election time come up, we sitting there on the bench by ourselves, everybody else up dancing and stuff. And my colleagues, they sitting there looking, wondering what to do. Next thing I know, hey, what's going on? Hey, stuff. I ain't finna sit up here looking like Willie Lump Lump. Like I don't know what's going on, like I'm a stranger. Strange man in a strange land. No. So if you be a part of them, I have situations where we might get a whole group of bishops on a conference call and ask them to do something. So would all of you make this announcement Sunday? Would all of you pass these flyers out for us? Or have your ushers do so and so? But that's my experience with trying to do it. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Muriel Martin, and I'm a retired teacher in the District of Columbia and a long life citizen here, and I'm very active in my community. I would like to just address this question to the gentleman who was talking about Mayor Fenty's initiative for the ex-offenders. I'm really kind of stressed that this morning when I woke up and turned on my news that the Franklin School, which housed many ex-offenders, was closed. And the statement was made, the goal is to eventually place them in housing. And so I thought to myself, maybe you would place them in housing and then close the shelter. So, and these are ex-offenders. So I just need a clarification on what's going on here, because we presented an image like this city is definitely supporting the ex-offenders, and my husband being one, I know that they don't. So could you clarify it for me, please?
I'm going to try. Well, I'll tell you like this, ma'am. I'm not the housing expert. I'm the ex-offender expert in D.C., but I do appreciate your question on many levels. When you talk about employment, you talk about housing, before you get to the point where you don't have housing, you don't have employment, it's because you've had an experience. You've been locked up. And I'm talking about, something I didn't read about, but something I lived. And so we're talking about stigma. We're talking about people who've been stigmatized to the point where people can just, without abashed, without any kind of thought of retribution, discriminate. Okay? So that's what we're talking about here, in the employment realm as well as in the housing realm. Persons who come to our office, 95% of those persons need employment, 95% of those people need housing. There's no easy answers in D.C. in terms of this housing piece. What we do is try to look at all our options in terms of whether we have a transitional opportunity, whether we have an opportunity for low income or subsidized opportunities. These are the things that my office, in terms of those contexts of ex-offenders, are trying to do. We understand the problem with the shelter closing down. And like I said, I can't get into all the housing politics because that's not my realm. I can lead you to people who can talk about that. But what I can talk about is what we're doing for ex-offenders in my office.
Do you fund your own organization?
I'm sorry?
Does the city fund your organization?
Yes, ma'am, they do.
Well, you know what I would like to suggest? That the money that we are putting into for programs for people to run organizations, maybe we need to buy a few buildings and put some families and ex-offenders in those to live.
I agree.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I can't see your name, but the lady that made the reference to slave mentality people. When we have people running, whether they're write-in or a regular candidate, none of those people should not be allowed the chance to present their premise to the people for voting. We have people with slave mentality who tell you, oh no, you can't speak, you just a write-in. And for years you've been struggling. People died for the right to vote. We got these kind of people sitting in here right now, but that's not the issue. I want to ask the question. Prior to release for the prisoners, is there not a way to set up some sort of pre-educational program to re-educate them prior to getting out, say a month or so, before they get out, to help prepare them. I'd like to see about doing something like that. Thank you.
I believe that across the country, although it's not equal, whether it be state or federal system, particularly since the work that Mr. Davis and others have done at the Second Chance Act, more attention has been brought to the fact that reintegration into society and reentry into society has to start, not just, excuse me, a week or so, but months, a year or more before someone gets ready to get out of prison. I have to admit that I've seen a shift, not an easy one, because you have to realize that many people still live in the mindset that once a person offends, they're always an offender. So there's a paradigm shift that's having to take place within correctional systems, within the staff of the correctional systems, to adopt an attitude of where we begin the process truthfully of trying to help someone who might not have been in touch with realities of outside months and months before. The Second Chance Act has put into place, through legislation, a number of steps to move closer toward that. It has been very specific in its direction, particularly to the federal system, to put some things in place that lean more to helping people through mentoring and other aspects that will, I think you will begin to see a little bit more concerted effort. Not saying that people haven't been doing some, but I think the legislation will move people much closer to where they should be. And I think once you see that shift, then a lot of the state systems, as resources develop, will follow.
Yeah, I want to say, too, that particularly when you're looking at younger people in the system, we have to be reminded sometimes that the juvenile justice system is built on a premise of rehabilitation. And so you absolutely have to start. Now, whether or not that's been implemented that way is obviously quite debatable. But programs like looking at best practices for responding to young people absolutely have to start, even in places where there's a transient population, even in detention centers, looking at some of those places and starting there to engage. And there are some very great models that have been working in Northern California looking at gender responsive and culturally competent responses to young people, so that it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach to young people, but really trying to work with their risk and needs factors.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm Queen Mother Dr. Deloise Blakely, and I'm the Community Mayor of Harlem, and also I'm an ambassador of goodwill to many African countries. The question that I raise, and anyone can answer it for me, how do we reclaim our family members who have been kidnapped from us? The greatest crime committed against a people has been the transatlantic of the Middle Passage of enslavement. It is a crime. How do we now deal with it in modern enslavement of reclaiming through human rights of our youth and our children and our divine family members?
That's a tough one, but...
First of all, I think that one of the things that was very enlightening to us was to be able to define the culture of crime and criminal justice in the language of slavery and enslavement. Because, quite frankly, many people hadn't looked at it like that. Many people hadn't seen that there is a very straight line connection between the psychology of slavery and the attitude of crime and what drives the notion to commit crime. I think one of the things that we have to do better is educate people about that connection between our history and today. I find it so amazing, even as we present sessions in the Congressional Black Caucus. Every year there are several sessions presented on those issues of slavery, enslavement, the transatlantic slave passages, but many people still don't know our history. And so therefore when it reoccurs in the crime and criminal justice realm, we don't recognize it and we don't understand it. One of the tools, I have to admit, that we have had that has worked very well for us in helping kids to understand human rights and the issues of crime and criminal justice was actually produced by Youth for Human Rights. They were PSAs that actually gave real small clips, 30-second clips, that gave some of the analogies of crime and criminal justice and put it into the terms of the Declaration of Human Rights. And perhaps you might want to look at getting a copy of those PSAs in your educational pursuits of trying to help us do that. And I urge all of us to look at the human rights and our civil rights and compare that to some of the privileges that are now taken from us, such as voting and some of the other things. DMC as it relates to schools, DMC, for those who don't understand that term, disproportionate minority contact. It all reoccurs from a historical perspective.
Yeah, I would just, sorry, were you ready to go? Okay. I would just say, too, that often in this process, first, I appreciate your question on a lot of different levels because we witness daily the constant dehumanization of our communities. And if you walk into any facilities, I'm actually a DMC trainer, right? So I go in and I talk to lawmakers and I talk to law enforcement and I talk to all kinds of folks from grandmothers, on about the ways in which we try to engage in this process of stopping this dehumanization. And I remember having a conversation with a young man who basically looked at me and was like, that's all good, Monique, that's great. We can read while we're here. We can, deconstruct ideas while we're here. But when I go back to my community in Richmond, talking about Richmond, California, he's like, I can't wave a book at somebody and expect for them to understand where I am. So, constantly, I think even as we engage in this conversation about human rights, folks aren't valuing the act of being human, right? Being human. They don't understand it. And part of that, I think, is our challenge and why it's critical for us to engage multiple stakeholders in this process, from parents to teachers and educators. I'm glad you stood up and talked about being a kindergarten teacher because it does begin with the expectations that we set and the standards that are in our schools. We talk about a lot of the decision making that happens in schools that can lead straight to involvement in the criminal justice system, juvenile justice system. So I think as long as we approach it as a continuum and recognize the places where we continue to dehumanize and correct that behavior, we will start to expect different outcomes.
I think we added that you have a last word on that.
Yeah, one other thing. I have found that kids will really wrap themselves around it if we can put it into a practical term. Speaking just specifically from California with pen and pencil, we took a template of the civil rights movement, the bus boycott, and put it into the terms of crime and criminal justice, asking kids to refuse for 40 days to engage in crime and violence, and to, as they did that, learn about their history, and to refuse to give up their seats in the classrooms toward crime and criminal justice and learn their history. And from that, kids have learned that they have more rights than Miranda rights. And have learned that that's not the only right that we died and fought and were enslaved around.
And I think all of this, yes, Rodney.
I was just thinking as you were speaking that, you look at any street corner in D.C. and you're going to see, throngs of young men standing out there and young women nowadays. And it just occurs to me that sometimes these folks are estranged without even having gone to the penitentiary, without even gone to, the juvenile facility. Nobody's talking to them. Nobody's approaching them. We walk around, we cross the streets. We're afraid of them. And so they're already gone. They haven't even left the block, but they're already far, far away from us. And I think that we know who these kids are, and all of them are not bad kids. Some of them out there doing dirt, but most of them are probably good kids, just wannabes. And start doing that, just old-fashioned reaching out, like when I was growing up in Southeast, and touching these kids one by one, speaking to them when you see them on the corner. Hey, how you doing? Just making that human contact, just bringing them back into the fold of humanity, and so they'll know there's some value. Somebody values them. Somebody speaking to them.
Well, let me thank all of us. We can't solve all of the problems at one time. But I want to thank the entire panel, and I'll just say one thing. One question was raised. The Federal Bureau of Prisons is beginning to look at, and they're only doing it in a few places right now, looking at individuals when they come in. I'm saying the best way to do reentry from my vantage point is that if a person is incarcerated, when you get that person, try and figure out why are they here. If you can figure out why they're there, then you can start planning and developing programs and activity to try and keep them from coming back. And that is beginning to be a thought in corrections, and people are beginning to think about it. Oftentimes, before you do something, you got to think about it. And so I think we're moving in that direction. And I do think that the question Queen Mother raised is a question that we all need to give serious consideration to, and that is, you can never know enough about your history. You can never know enough about where you came from. You can never know enough about what you've gone through. I always say, if you don't know where you come from, it's hard to understand how you got to where you are. And you really don't have much conceptualization of where you ought to be going. And so, yeah, it's true that we've experienced slavery. But if you think of evaluation, not only in terms of the heights to which you have not reached, but if you also think of the depths from which you have come, it's hard for anybody to tell me that we have not made a whole lot of progress in this country. I mean, even though there's still every kind of disparity, every kind of inequity, every kind of thing going on that ought not to be going on. But W. Du Bois suggested to a person one time who asked him a question. She says, Dr. Du Bois, why is it that Negroes, I mean, people were still using the terminology Negro at that time, seem to have such a hard time making it into the mainstream? I mean, every meeting I go to, you all are complaining and talking about problems. And supposedly Dr. Du Bois suggested to this young person, he said, darling, let me tell you, a people so deprived ought not to be expected to race with the wind. And so if you think about where we have come from, we've come a mighty long way in this country. And yeah, there are people who still have the experiences of this 12-year-old girl who wrote a little poem. And she said, no chains on my hands, no chains on my feet, can't you see? But the chains on my mind are keeping me from being free. And so we have to help unlock some minds. We thank this panel, and we will transition. Thank you all. We're going to try and get started because we really want to we have some real experiences. And as you can see, we've got a whole group of African American males up here on this panel. And we've been talking about black men this, black men that. black boys this, black men that, and what we can do and what we can't. Again, we want to thank everybody. Especially do I want to thank Ms. Helen Mitchell, who has put together and coordinated all of this activity for us. And that's Ms. Mitchell, the lady wearing black. A black woman wearing black. So we call that black on black in black. So it's hard to get much blacker. Hard to get much blacker than that. But one of the things that we have found is that it's very difficult to talk about problems like criminal justice and know that African Americans are seriously, disproportionately engaged in the system. We try to get to some of the reasons why, but we also try to get to how do we keep it from happening? I mean, how do we prevent it? The United States of America, as you probably have heard already, is the most incarcerated nation in the world. We have more people in prison in this my country 'tis of thee. The country that is the spotlight, supposedly, for the world. But we have more people in prison, not only proportionately, but in actual numbers, even for countries whose populations are much larger than ours. Even countries that we call great violators of human rights. You wouldn't think that there were more people in the penitentiary in the United States than in China or in Russia, and you just wouldn't think that. I mean, you just would not think that. But the truth is the light, and the light is salvation. The book says if you know the truth will set you free. And so we are fortunate that we have been able to engage an outstanding group of men. I'll just end up not introducing all of them at one time and then saying, go ahead. Because I think that oftentimes we are among giants and don't know it. You see, if you take a giant and put him in a hole, you won't know he's a giant. But if you get him out of the hole and elevate him, or give him a platform where he can stand, then you can see that you got a giant rather than a midget. And so the perception of things in terms of how we think makes a lot of difference in relationship to how we act. The book says again that as a man thinketh, so is he. So if I think you're a midget, you're a midget in my mind. But if I think you are a giant, then you become a giant. If boys growing up think that men who do certain things are giants, then they want to emulate those giants. We are pleased that Mr. Allen Houston, a former, and I must confess that there were times that I did not like him. He hit them long jump shots on the Bulls. I didn't like him at all. I said, keep him in New York or somewhere. Former NBA All-Star and Olympic gold medalist who uses his celebrity status to promote a role dear to his heart. He is the father of 4. He is the national spokesperson for the National Fatherhood Initiative, and will talk about the importance of a father's presence. I don't know how we turn this thing around. That in black life, more than half the children being born and being raised by single parent families. In my congressional district, 34% of the children live with someone other than their natural parents. And I must confess that my district is much better off than where a lot of other folks live, because I come from Chicago, the Windy City, you know, where we got all kind of black folks who got money, millionaires, drive Mercedes Benzes. Some of them got a half a dozen houses. Some of them even got houses like what you call it. They don't know where they all at. you know. You know. But we still got 34% of the African American children in my congressional district who live in homes not of their natural parents. And so, Alan, not only do I want to commend you and congratulate you for having a very successful professional career, but I want to commend you for being a role model in other ways that people who've never been able to dribble a basketball, they could also try and emulate and try and see themselves in your shoes. And we're delighted to have you with us this afternoon. Please begin. Either way.
This is more comfortable. First of all, I just want to thank you. It's an honor to be here, to be in a partnership with the National Fatherhood Initiative. I want to kind of redirect everything you just said, really towards my father, because the reason I'm here and I'm so passionate about this issue is because of the experience that I had. And that is an experience of a man who taught me my identity. And I think one of the issues, you know, that you mentioned earlier was why are we talking about this issue? And I think one of the things that we've always talked about is a father can give his son, especially, and his family, their identity. And he taught me what it means to be a man. At a young age, I saw what it means to treat your wife a certain way. I saw what it was to love your children unconditionally. And my father, for those of you who don't know, was a man who traveled a lot. And I didn't see him a whole lot when I was young. So it wasn't one of those things where I saw him a lot. We had to kind of figure that out. But when I did see him, he taught me those special lessons. He taught me how to respect each other. He taught me how to love. And so I guess one of the things when you talk about when a son or a child sees a giant, when they see their father, every child is going to see their father that way. But what is the image? What is the image of that giant? And so I think it was more of a consistency that I saw in my father. One of the things that we wanted to do, as I was so fortunate enough to play in the NBA, I played for my father in college as well, and that wasn't such a great experience. But what I saw during that, I actually learned more in those 4 years playing for my father than I learned in 17 years in kind of watching him kind of come in and out in coaching. Because when I got to see him on a daily basis, I got to saw how he handled being criticized. I got to saw how he would go into another young man's house and say, I'm not going to pay you $1 million, but I'm going to teach you the right way to live your life. I saw him when he was turned down to join a country club because he was the first black coach at the University of Tennessee and the first coach in the Southeastern Conference. I saw how he handled that with integrity. I saw how he made me miss class sometimes because I wasn't doing so well in one of my classes. He made me miss practice. He made me miss practice because I wasn't doing so well in one of my classes. All those are things you can't sit down in an hour and tell your son or your daughter. Those are consistent daily things that only you can show, and when you're in it on an active basis. So when we had an opportunity to say, how can we transfer these skills? How can we transfer these lessons? How can we try to apply them and teach them? We decided to start a weekend retreat called Fathers Knows Best. And this is where the National Fatherhood Initiative has asked to partner with us. And it's really the one thing that we get from this is that during this weekend, a father and a son can come play basketball with his father. They laugh at each other, they joke on each other, they compete with and against each other. They spend time with each other. They talk about issues from sex. They talk about issues from communication. They talk about anger. We talk about a lot of different things. But the most important thing that we try to strategically cover and do in that weekend retreat is we talk about the importance of a spiritual legacy that a man has to leave his family. And you know, I can look back, and I didn't really realize it when I was young. But, you know, my wife and I have 4 children and 1 on the way. And, you know, I've been extremely blessed. And when we look back at the things that we've been able to be fortunate enough to experience, I like to link it to my father and my father and his father and their commitment to leaving a spiritual legacy and making sure that connection is not disjointed. And I think that's one of the most important things that strategically that we're trying to portray, is because when you teach them spiritually, as nobody's perfect, but if you can pass on that legacy, then we'll know that your generations will be blessed as well.
Well, thank you very much. I'm certain that we will have time for some dialogue and some interaction. Our next presenter, Mr. Roland Warren, is president of the National Fatherhood Initiative, whose mission is to improve the well-being of children by increasing the proportion of children growing up with involved, responsible, and committed fathers. He will share the range of fatherhood services that the NFL provides fatherhood programs, the NFI.
UFL's money.
Provides fatherhood programs across the country. Mr. Roland Warren.
Thank you. Okay, let's see if I can get this to work up here. There we go. Okay. Well, first off, thank you, Congressman Davis, for putting together this forum. It's always an important venue when you think about so many of the issues that are affecting communities, especially the African American community, and certainly talking about the importance of working on this corrections issue and a specific focus on reentry has been really great. And some of you I know were here for the session before, but one of the leadership roles that Congressman Davis has played is helping to push through the Second Chance Act, which has been very important legislation. Which really has been very important legislation in terms of helping to connect men and women, for that matter, back into communities. Because one of the things that we know is that there are obviously millions of people that are incarcerated, but 650,000 of those folks come home every single year back into communities. And the real question is, how are they coming back? And in what condition are they coming back? And so that work is especially important. I want to thank Alan also for taking time to be here today as well. We've been delighted to partner with him and look forward to doing a lot more work. Let me just start briefly by just telling a little story about myself in terms of kind of how I got involved in this work and why it means so much to me. My background is really business. I used to work for Goldman Sachs. I understand there might be some other people who used to work there as well. So anyway, I sold high apparently, but I used to work at Goldman Sachs and went to college and did that whole deal and started there and my background is really business, and people ask me, well, why are you doing this work? And moreover, they ask me, when did you get in the fatherhood business? And I tell them I got in the fatherhood business when I was about 6 years old, when my parents split up. That's when I got in the fatherhood business, because that's when I started to really truly understand what it meant not to have your dad there on a regular basis. And you heard Alan's legacy and the importance of that, and mine is a bit different, where I had a dad that wasn't as connected as I certainly wanted him to be, and hoped that he would be, and really needed him to be. And I was thinking back to the whole corrections issue because, my father died about 10 years ago, and I remember being at the funeral. He was laid out in the casket, and I was sitting in the second row, and I remember as people were coming up on the platform talking about my dad and saying all these wonderful things, all of which my sense would tell me were true. My dad was a great guy in many, many, many ways, despite maybe some of the issues around this, but people were coming up on the platform and saying all these wonderful things. And a guy came up and said, started talking about my dad, and he said, he came to me when I was in prison to help me. You see, because one of the things about my father, he had sort of two lives. He had the life that he had to some degree when he was with my mom, but then, he had an epiphany of faith and became a pastor and had a second life, but was never really able to really reconcile the first part of his life. But he said, Pastor, when he came to me when I was in prison, and he helped me and he mentored me, and I'm now out of prison, my life's on track, I'm now married, I have kids, and I remember as he was talking, and even people even before this guy were talking, I remember just this anger and this rage just growing inside of me. And I was just beside myself. I couldn't cry, thought I was obligated to, but just nothing was happening there. And when that guy said that, he said, he came to me when I was in prison. I remember thinking, I went to Princeton, I went to Penn, but did I need to go to prison in order to get my dad's love and affection? And that stuck with me for two reasons. One, it really helped me understand just this issue even more. I wasn't doing this fatherhood work. I was working for, I can't remember who, Pepsi or Goldman or somebody like that. But it really helped me understand fully that kids have a hole in their soul in the shape of their dad. I believe God puts it there. And when a father is unable or unwilling to connect, it leaves a wound, it leaves a scar. So there I was, 37, 38 years old, but still at that moment I was a 10-year-old kid waiting for a dad who didn't show up. But it also told me another thing, which at that time I didn't even know because I didn't even know I'd be here today. The power of someone reaching in to a prison cell the transformational power that happens when someone makes that connection. And that really is what, from my standpoint, what the Second Chance Act is about, and, why this issue is such an important issue. Because one man, my dad, who didn't have it all together in terms of his own kids necessarily, was able to reach into the life of this guy and help that guy create a different legacy for his kids. And that's a powerful piece. So from my standpoint, when I came to NFI, one of the key areas that I knew that where we needed to focus was around this whole area of reaching guys who have been incarcerated and helping them connect with their kids. We know that's so critically important, and when you look at the research, it says the same thing. That when you look at the corrections piece, and when you look at what really helps a guy move out of that setting and really become reintegrated back into society, what helps that happen is if he's got a connection to people in community. I always say it's all about who picks you up when you get out. If you get picked up and it's your boys, keep the light on, you'll be back. Right? If your boy's the same one that's got you there, you'll be back. But if you get off that bus and you run into the arms of a child that you've made a commitment to, that you've connected with, and you've got support from a family and a community that's encouraging you, that's inspiring you, shut the light off. I've got work to do here. So that's the core of kind of the work that we do at NFI around the incarcerated community, trying to help dads connect heart to heart with their kids. It's a universal principle, and we think it's a powerful one. And that's why we're so excited, A, to be here, and B, with the work that the Congressman is doing, because it's transformational. So what I want to do is just kind of tell you a little bit about what we're doing in that setting, just to give you a sense of sort of cast a vision of how powerful that kind of work can be in communities. We started our work really focusing, as I said, on the corrections community. We focus across really 7 different areas. We focus in schools, we focus in businesses, in terms of adding work-family balance. We focus with community-based programs. We focus in hospitals. We focus in churches and houses of faith and communities of faith. And we also focus in healthcare and hospitals, birthing centers, and pregnancy centers, all to try to help connect fathers to their kids heart to heart. But corrections is one of these areas where a lot of this comes together. And so we started this programming I guess we first started our program called Long Distance Dad back in 1998, 99 or so, even before I came to NFI. And then we built a new program about 3 years ago called Inside Out Dad, which is a curriculum we're using in prisons across the country. Like it says on the slide, changing inmates on the inside and preparing them for reentry when they get out. And it's a really powerful model, because when you look at the data, as I said before, there's so many children that are connected to parents that are incarcerated, 1.3 million children. So we know that this is an issue that's affecting our kids. And the data shows overwhelmingly that when a kid has a parent that's incarcerated, they're much more likely to have some type of interaction with the criminal justice system themselves. So we see this not only just helping those dads, but also breaking that intergenerational crime link. And it's been just powerful the way that this has worked for us. Already, just in the short time we've done this, we're in nearly 400 facilities, 41 states. 13 states have standardized on this curricula. I just had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and I heard Congressman Davis talking about that change, absolute change there in terms of how they're thinking about helping guys move out of the system and become productive citizens. So that's a powerful strategy in terms of doing that. Basically, the program it comes in both Spanish and English, but it's laid out so that there are 12 base sessions and then 26 optional sessions. So it's designed both for long stay and short stay facilities. And I really like the name Inside Out Dad, because that's really what transforming is all about. When I think about the programming that we try to do, there are 3 things that you really want to do. You want to take a guy from reflection to correction to connection. Reflection to correction to connection. The analogy I like to use is, for those of you who wear makeup, I do every now and then for certain occasions. I'm not wearing it today, you probably can tell, but for those of you who wear makeup, like somebody tells you your makeup is bad, what's the first thing you do? Do you start correcting it? No, you say, get your mirror out. That's right. Head to the ladies' room, or men's room, for those of you who do that, right? You look in the mirror, and you say, you know what, here's where my problem is. And then, and only then, do you start correcting that. And then once you've done that, you can reconnect. Well, that's the same kind of strategy with this program. You first got to help these guys make the connection, because here's one of the pieces. Over half the guys who are incarcerated are fathers, but the vast majority of them grew up without fathers. And that's the thing to really get in your head. You know, it's difficult to be what you don't see. It's difficult to be what you don't see. So if you had a dad that was not there, was absent, and you went out into the community and found the wrong kind of person to show you what it means to be a man, it's difficult to be what you don't see. So we try to take those guys through that process, through the programming. And the results have been very good. We had a study that we did with the Department of Corrections in Maryland, where we had a control group and had some guys going through the program. And what we found was that there were statistically significant gains in fathering knowledge and also in terms of their attitudes and even behaviors around this. So we know that we've got something here that really makes a big difference, and we're very excited about the opportunity to get more and more dads involved in this that are incarcerated, because you see a increased frequency in calling, writing, visits from kids than you did prior to going through this program. So we think it's a very, very powerful way to do that. Now, I did an interview, I'll just close with this, with DC Channel 8 that I thought might be helpful, because it gives you a broader sense of kind of the work that's being done here, even in DC, related to this.
Well, a program in D.C. is giving incarcerated fathers the resources they need to help them connect with their children. On Monday, the National Fatherhood Initiative and the D.C. jail will graduate the first class of dads from NFI's Inside Out Dad program. The Fatherhood Initiative prepares fathers for when they get out of jail so they can build a lasting relationship with their families. Joining us now live with more on the program is Roland Warren, president of the National Fatherhood Initiative. Thanks for being here tonight.
Glad to be here, Scott.
So tell us a little bit about this program.
Well, this is a program that was started several years ago by the National Fatherhood Initiative, very focused on helping incarcerated fathers develop the skills that they need in order to be good dads. And we know in D.C. that there's about 5,300 folks in all the correctional facilities, 2,000 in D.C. jails. Most of these guys are guys who live in the community. About 7 out of 10 of them do. And we think it's really important to have programming specifically designed to help a man develop the skills that he needs to be a good dad, because there's so much research that shows that when guys develop those skills, that they're less likely to return to prison.
Are you seeing the benefits already?
Oh, absolutely. You know, connecting fathers heart to heart with their kids. And the big point here is that most of these guys come back into communities. I mean, there's about 650,000 people that come out of prison. About half of those are fathers, and the reality is that they're either going to come back into communities as whole men, able to contribute and able to pass on a legacy maybe different than the one they inherited, or not. And so our work is really focused on helping them have the skills that they need to connect to their children.
How do the graduates feel about the program? I would imagine they see this as a necessary crutch at times.
Well, absolutely. It's interesting because one of the quotes from one of the folks that facilitates the program is that this is actually one of the programs in prison that they're waiting to get into. A lot of times they have to try to encourage guys to go to programs, but this one, which is focused on helping them be a better father and even frankly deal with some issues that they had with their own fathers and their own families, is really a critically important one, and one that they're excited to have and be a part of.
What kind of numbers are you seeing? How many people are taking part in this? And I would imagine this is one that you want to grow regardless of how many you are seeing already involved.
Yeah, absolutely. The typical class is about 20 to 30 folks that go through the program. It's about a 12-week program, but there are also optional sessions rather that enable it for long stay or short stay facilities. And it's not just a program that we're doing in D.C., but we're doing it all across the country, and folks can learn about that at our website, which is fatherhood.org.
What's the toughest part of this? I mean, I think most people would look at this on its face and agree it's a good cause. It's an important part of making sure that people can get rehabilitated and get back out into the world and have a more productive place in society. But there's got to be some obstacle to this.
Well, absolutely there are. And the biggest challenge is obviously is funding, because so much of the focus in the prison systems is around punishment, if you will, and maybe not as much around rehabilitation. And that's critically important. And we really think it's really important to allocate more and more funding towards programs that are going to help people be better when they come out of prison, rather than be in a situation where they're actually worse when they come out of prison. And we think this is a critical aspect of that, connecting fathers and kids heart to heart. What could be wrong with that?
Roland Warren from the Fatherhood Initiative, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your time. Good luck.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much.